So,
welcome everyone. And for those of you who weren't with us last time, we are kind of in the heart of the nature of Gothic now, the central portion of it, um, as we make our way through the six characteristics of Gothic: savageness, changefulness, naturalism, grotesqueness, rigidity, and redundance. So as we make our way through that list of characteristics, um, we are at paragraph 16, and as I say, we're going to try something here and see if this works. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
on my screen, it's a
Maybe,
little small.
yes,
Is it?
it is quite small, quite
Oh,
small,
is it?
Gabriel.
Yeah, on mine it's full size.
Oh
Yes,
dear.
but the
I
Let me see.
sharing, the sharing is always smaller.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have this as a kind of reference point. At least I think it will be better for the recording for
Okay.
there to be text up for people who are listening to this later to oh, here's Miriam. Very good. Okay, well, we're going to turn this over to Emma Zdenio and to Miriam Piluti Namer, both of them coming to us from the Fors Center at the Ca' Foscari University in Venice. As we indicated last time, Emma teaches English at Ca' Foscari University, and she's published on Victorian criticism, on the theory and history of translation, and has written several essays on John Ruskin's rhetoric and style. And Miriam, who's joining us, is a distinguished archaeologist and also works and serves on the board of directors for the Fors Center. So, Emma, take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We can start from more or less the paragraph we stopped at.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, paragraph
At
16.
paragraph 16.
Yeah,
Emma,
sorry.
if I make a note, what I think would be a more efficient way we can do this maybe would be to read do these readings in groups rather than stopping after each individual paragraph.
Yes.
So I'm suggesting that we do 16 and 17 up to where have I got it? Up to the bottom of page 197, we have so long been endeavoring to put down. So if we can do that as one reading, I think that will be good.
Okay. Yes, very well.
Can I just interject for a moment, Gabriel? Emma? I have at the top of my screen, I've got a size bar indicating that I'm on 100%.
Oh,
My text is, I think, as Gabriel's. In other words, it's full size. I'm just wondering if those of you who
Yes,
are
good,
finding
very
it a
good.
bit small,
Yeah,
No,
because
I'm
I've got
100%.
100% on mine. That little.
does that work? If you tick on the plus button there, does that help to
Yeah,
get
you
it
see,
bigger?
Yes, that it works.
Oh, it's
If you-
helping now. Do that again, please, because
Yeah.
when I tried to do it, it didn't work, but it's getting
No,
bigger. When
it's Gabriel who can do it because he is the
Gabriel,
one who's
thank heaven.
sharing. Yes, just
Excellent.
Gabriel.
Okay, it's a little better.
Please,
Yeah, Gabriel,
a bit
you're the
more, maybe.
Oh,
a bit
yes.
more.
Yes, that's getting much better.
so is
Yeah.
that's readable?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you
Click
do a
click it
little
once
bit
more.
more?
Even a bit
Yeah.
more, maybe, Gabriel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's much better.
And
Yeah.
may I also make a suggestion that
Mhm.
if we all of us mute until such time as we need to speak, we'll probably be able to remove the interference that's causing other ambient noise to get on in.
Hmm.
That, yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So, so let's start reading. Is there perhaps a volunteer or Gabriel maybe can start reading,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
In a very famous passage from the Nature of Gothic, this paragraph 16. We have much studied and much perfected of late the great civilized invention of the division of labor. Only we give it a false name. It is not, truly speaking, the labor that is divided, but the men. Divided into mere segments of men, broken into small fragments and crumbs of life, so that all the little piece of intelligence that is left in a man is not enough to make a pin or a nail, but exhausts itself in making the point of a pin or the head of a nail. Now, it is a good and desirable thing, truly, to make many pins in a day, but if we could only see with what crystal sand their points were polished, sand of human soul, much to be magnified before it can be discerned for what it is, we should think there might be some loss in it also. And the great cry that rises from all our manufacturing cities, louder than their furnace blast, is all in very deed for this, that we manufacture everything there except men. We blanch cotton and strengthen steel and refine sugar and shape pottery, but to brighten, to strengthen, to refine, or to form a single living spirit never enters into our estimate of advantages. And all the evil to which that cry is urging our myriads can be met only in one way, not by teaching or preaching, for to teach them is but to show them their misery, and to preach to them, if we do nothing more than preach, is to mock at it. It can be met only by a right understanding on the part of all classes of what kinds of labor are good for men, raising them and making them happy, by a determined sacrifice of such convenience or beauty or cheapness as is to be got only by the degradation of the workman, and by equally determined demand for the products and results of healthy and ennobling labor. See if I can get this down a little bit. And now it will be asked, are these products to be recognized, and is this demand to be regulated? Easily, by the observance of three broad and simple rules. Never encourage the manufacture of any article not absolutely necessary, in the production of which invention has no share. Never demand an exact finish for its own sake, but only for some practical or noble end. Never encourage imitation or copying of any kind except for the sake of preserving records of great works. The second of these principles is the only one which directly rises out of the consideration of our immediate subject, but I shall briefly explain the meaning and extent of the first also, reserving the enforcement of the third for another place. Never encourage the manufacture of anything not necessary in the production of which invention has no share. For instance, glass beads are utterly unnecessary, and there is no design or thought employed in their manufacture. They are formed by first drawing out the glass into rods. These rods are chopped up into fragments of the size of beads by the human hand, and the fragments are then rounded in the furnace. The men who chop up the rods sit at their work all day, their hands vibrating with a perpetual and exquisitely timed palsy, and the beads dropping beneath their vibration like hail. Neither they nor the men who draw out the rods or fuse the fragments have the smallest occasion for the use of any single human faculty. And every young lady, therefore, who buys glass beads is engaged in the slave trade, and in a much more cruel one than that which we have so long been endeavoring to put down.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Well, this is a very central, as you were saying, chapter, paragraphs also, and very well known. There is, as we have read last time, the issue of the dehumanization, say, of work, of industrial work, and Ruskin is here. But what he is saying that I find particularly interesting and Ruskinian is that we should not teach nor preach them, these people, and I find this very beautiful, very, very interesting. These people don't need any patronizing way of dealing with them, but understanding. So putting oneself on the same, say, level and sympathizing and understanding. I am particularly so right understanding on the part of all classes what kind of labor are good for men, and so this is a point, a passage which I find particularly interesting and Ruskinian. Yeah, I don't know what if you wish to add or to comment further on this passage.
I have a comment, excuse me. It's just a comparison to
Mm.
the organization of labor unions in the United States. Samuel Gompers was one of the great organizers, and he began in a cigar factories. And of course, probably here, as in the glass beads, the term used is piecework. So here you have, instead of being paid by the hour, absolutely, you're only paid by the object that you create, which obviously puts tremendous pressure on people and all of this. So he actually convinced them that they could give up perhaps one or two cigars that they were rolling in order to have one person read to them. And I keep thinking, obviously this was monastic refectory time. People ate and they were read to.
Yeah.
But Gompers, this was the beginning of educating people, but it was done by people who were not captains of industry. They were the people struggling to realize that people obviously needed fair treatment, but they felt, and rightly so, that the way they could claim it was to have some buy-in and understand why they should organize, band together. But he read them great books. This was not preaching. He read them great books. But anyway, Sam Gompers is a hero, obviously. Hero of mine. My father was a union man. He was a steam fitter. So I definitely know what it means to have the support of the people you're working with. So anyway, that was just it. And it just seemed to the issue of, yes, you can't teach them, meaning you can't teach them come in and the do-gooders. Oh, now I'll teach them something. This is from the people themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. What period are we talking about, Sam Gompers?
Oh, 1900s, 1890s, 1900s,
1890s.
before the shirtwaist. Oh, yeah, before the horrible shirtwaist fire, where the girls were all, the doors were locked, and they were committing suicide by jumping out of the windows. And suddenly, someone thought, perhaps, there ought to be some intervention that prevents exploitation of people to the extent that when there's a fire, they can't even escape.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Does anyone know if Ruskin had read Baudelaire?
Interesting.
C'est
No.
nommé.
Just Baudelaire's Salon reviews of the 1840s, 1845 and 1846, run on exactly the same theme, but with regard to pain. In the passages that Gabriel and Emma have singled out for us, a great deal is said about the importance of, as it were, failing to finish. That if you finish, you destroy what you're trying to state. You destroy what you're trying to express. And that was exactly what Baudelaire was remarking upon with regard to the Salon, looking at the distinction between the followers of Ingres on the one hand, and Ingres was still alive at that point, and Delacroix on the other hand. And of course, the difference was between Ingres' followers, who tended to finish their paintings very minutely so that you could not see a brush stroke, and the works of Delacroix, where you can see every brush stroke, particularly in late Delacroix. Delacroix was in his getting on into his late period by the 1840s. And Ruskin is concerned with exactly the same idea, that Baudelaire put it something like this. I'm going to misquote this, but he put it something like, there is a great difference between a work that is finished and a work that is complete. A work that is complete may not be finished, and a work that is finished may not be complete at all. And as I understand it, the importance of that is that the expression is made partly through lack of finish. And that's something that Ruskin seems to have been considering when he was writing Modern Painters. So then, you wonder if Baudelaire read Ruskin. The dates are incredibly tight, as you can see from that. Baudelaire 1845, 1846, Ruskin 1843 onwards.
Yeah,
that would be well worth considering further and examining further.
I checked the index actually, Nicholas.
Oh, thank you.
There's no reference in the collected works to Baudelaire.
Okay. Okay.
No.
But
Yes.
that is not dispositive. It simply it simply demonstrates an absence of information.
Ruskin, dare I say, Ruskin would have hated to confess to having read Baudelaire.
His father would never have approved.
No, he would not. Or his mother, for that matter. But
yeah, we can
just
perhaps.
sorry.
Sorry. No. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just back to pins. As we know, that came direct from Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, and is absolutely crucial in, it seems to me anyway, in Ruskin's understanding of what he sees as the horrors of the Industrial Revolution. Adam Smith takes the instance of pins precisely because the manufacture of one pin at a time, Adam Smith sees as utterly soul-destroying. Whereas if you develop one skill at a time, then you may execute more pins than you actually were executing before. And in Adam Smith's view, you may then gain more leisure time. So there are complex arguments, and Adam Smith is still, I think, quite often misunderstood in this respect.
Agreed, but I think what more particularly what Ruskin is doing here is stating the transition from hand craftsmanship or in which a person develops skill and ability and intelligence in a particular area, and on the other hand, the imposition of a single repeated task in which no opportunity for intelligence or creativity is possible. and the soul well, when we have more leisure in the times that when it's not working, one does not have the opportunity for the expression of anything resembling intellect in the task at hand,
Mm.
and um, and that is a terrible thing.
Mm. Intellect, or perhaps as Ruskin would have it, communication of the soul.
Mhm.
Yes,
He's
Yeah,
very
that
interested in the soul, isn't he?
yeah,
that is a far better expression of what he's talking about. Yes, yes. Thank you, Professor Friend.
The
It's
I would say the underlying attack of Ruskin still seems to be previous, that is neoclassical aesthetics, which saw the separation of mind and hand in Reynolds' discourses, for example. This is said very clearly, and Ruskin is also trying to state a different aesthetics, different from the neoclassical and Reynolds one. So saying that man was was a compound of hand and mind, well, he meant to challenge, say, this vision. And as far as the imperfection, the aesthetics of the unfinished, certainly also Browning was saying something significant in a poem he wrote about Andrea del Sarto, and whose subtitle was A Faultless Painter. And the weakness of Andrea del Sarto was exactly that he was a faultless painter. As
yeah.
a painter, he was pursuing perfection, finiteness, and as a man, he was instead a failing man, a too weak man, and so on. So yes, I
And
thought,
thank you for
oh,
that. Yes, that's
yes,
great. And of course, there's a lot in Browning that is, it has all the deliberate lack of finish of conversation,
yes, too, yes,
which is wonderful, absolutely wonderful in
thank
Browning.
you, yes,
Anyway, yes, that's marvelous.
yes, thank
Yes.
you.
Um,
it's also worth, I think, pointing out, just in terms of the text itself, that of course there's the reference to the glass works of Murano in the
Yeah,
glass beads,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
and then
yeah,
this first intimation, which he then later develops, of kind of ethical consumerism,
exactly,
the notion of the problem of purchasing objects which are created through the degradation of the worker,
yeah.
the
exactly,
needing to be
yes,
aware of the source of the products that one purchases and the effects on the conditions of the workers who make them.
absolutely. Yes, one sense is that he is addressing really to a traveler person, a British traveler somehow,
Mhm.
in the Stones of
Yeah.
Venice. He is
Mm,
thinking of this kind of reader, I would say.
yes.
Well,
Yes,
particularly in the popularity of the Travelers edition of the Song
yes,
of Venice, where
yes,
it was abridged in order to allow travelers to use the book as a kind of guidebook.
The guidebook. And,
yes.
and the best guidebook that's ever been written on Venice. So, yes.
Is there any reference between Ruskin and Karl Marx, or Marx and Ruskin?
He has never. Well, I found actually in a letter a reference to Karl Marx, to I think unpublished letter at Sheffield. So he certainly was aware. He knew, it does not mention, but at some point in Preterita, it says also that he could be a communist, as well as in other point, he says, I am a conservative, a Tory of the old, yes.
Yeah, the
style.
reddest of the red, as he called it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So certainly he knew, but it doesn't.
Later in this passage that you have asked us to read, Gabriel and Emma, he refers to the Italian Revolution in the epilogue, the 1881 epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks back at the Italian Revolution of Garibaldi, and he, as far as he's concerned, the Italians were not living under the oppressive yoke of the Austrians. And that he never heard anybody complaining about the yoke of the Austrian emperor. So I find that very interesting as well, that him as the Tory of the old school, running alongside that.
I've always loved Bernard Shaw's comment in his lecture on Ruskin, delivered for the centennial of Ruskin's birth. In 1919, where he says the difference between the invective of Marx and the invective of Ruskin is that why Ruskin was so much more effective was that Ruskin delivers his invective without malice of any kind, which is a lovely.
That's great.
There's no malice in Ruskin's invective.
That's great. No, there isn't. There's gentleness.
It was an appeal.
Yeah.
The way a preacher would appeal to people, to people's best instincts.
Yes. Yes.
I have a question about the passage that Gabe just read. Well, first, one real quick comment. The never encourage the manufacture of anything not necessary. I've got to feel that if Ruskin walked through a Walmart today, he'd have an aneurysm, seeing rows and rows of unnecessary creations. But that's not actually what I was going to mention. We sort of glided right past what seems like a fairly problematic sentence, where he's saying that people who create glass beads are worse off than people that are than slaves, than people that are in the slave trade. That seems a bit of a stretch. I can't imagine anyone today would find that defensible.
Well, I think it's actually one of the points that Ruskin is actually insisting on, not here and in many places, is that ethically Britain had come to the enlightened view that the slave trade was immoral, and was actually, of course, as we know, through the Navy, was fighting the slave trade internationally at this point. So Ruskin says, well, that's terrific, great for you, but you're failing to notice in your industrial models that you're reproducing it. And of course, what I think is, what Ruskin doesn't say this, I don't know that he knew it, but we now know that the practice of working people to death on the plantations in order to increase the production of, sugar or whatever it might be, and the discovery of the enormous profits that could be made from working a large number of people to death, was one of the models that occasioned the development of the modern factory. In other words, that model of Caribbean plantation owners, that model was then with the idea of the massive profits that might be made if you could summon large numbers of people to make products. Over a long period of time, you could the productivity was and the profits were immense, and that was one of the motivations for adopting, in effect, the slavery model of the plantation to the model of the factory.
I get what he was doing there, but if you wanted to equate them, that's one thing. But to say that the worker is in a much, much more cruel situation than somebody who has no choice whatsoever, I found that odd.
I'm adding something just sort of interpretive here. Someone, Gabe cited recent studies, and previously people looked upon, let's say in the United States, they were looking upon what was happening in the South and how bad these things were, or even the slaves who existed in the North and were sometimes freed. And when they were freed, they actually stayed with the people that they were working with, on a different level.
Right.
Ruskin saw these people, if he didn't know what Gabe just spoke about, that is sort of the industrialization. That's the key. The industrialization of the sugar plantations, not the sort of, oh, well, this is how I would go out and, till the land. But the industrialization that said, we just have here's a resource. We exhaust this resource in order to make this profit. But then we have more resources. So, hey, resource versus profit, okay, we'll have the best solution. So I think someone who hasn't seen that or knows about that can, I think, easily conceive of this mind sort of destroying activity day after day after day, frequently even 7, 8 days a week, no breaks, no conversations, whatever, as actually killing the spirit rather than someone working on a plantation and getting up and being with other people, actually having to engage in a manual activity that isn't always exactly the same. And that, so I could see him conceiving, as Gabe said so eloquently, really, this industrialization so that a human being is really like one small part of a machine and cannot deviate ever. But of course, his eloquence of calling out, you are now creating industrialized slavery, even as we now all have, cried for the elimination of the transportation of slaves as we've known it, right? So yeah, it's very quite eloquent and complex, that area.
Key point at
Yes.
the beginning of what Gabe was reading, which was you are put to stern choice in this matter. You must either make a tool of the creature or a man of him. You cannot make both. So this is to do with what he calls the estimate of advantages, which I read as bottom line accounting. If you're concerned with the Industrial Revolution estimate of advantages, you're looking at the bottom line. And exactly as Virginia says, you are seeing human beings merely as tools and as a resource. On the other hand, if you look at a different kind of estimate of advantages, you might be thinking that you could be making people, he calls them men, he could be making people out of this or alongside or with this industrial process. And he's proclaiming that that is never considered by industrialists.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think, dare I say, I don't think he's actually right about that, because his period coincides with some extremely interesting and adventurous new projects for ensuring the betterment of the lot of workers in the Industrial Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a sense, he is preaching to some of his audience would be seen as the converted already in their practice. And I find that very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Emma,
Yes.
shall we go on?
Yes, yes.
Thank you
We
all.
can. We have lots of things to say. Yes, we can go on and read paragraph 22
Yeah, 22
to
to
25.
25, right? And
22, 25.
25 would end with on 204 with and the law of human judgment mercy. That would
Yes, yes.
that.
Is there a volunteer for this passage? Virginia, would you like to? Thank you.
I'm unmuting. Uh, I'll have to ask Gabe to scroll because
Sure.
when I need it, well, okay, good. I should be led far from the matter in hand if I were to pursue this interesting subject. Enough, I trust, has been said to show the reader that the rudeness or imperfection which at first rendered the term Gothic one of reproach is indeed, when rightly understood, one of the most noble characters of Christian architecture, and not only a noble, but an essential one. It seems a fantastic paradox, but it is nevertheless the most important truth that no architecture can be truly noble which is not imperfect. And this is easily demonstrable. For since the architect, whom we will suppose capable of doing all in perfection, cannot execute the whole with his own hands, he must either make slaves of his workmen in the old Greek and present English fashion, and level his work to a slave's capacities, which is to degrade it, or else he must take his workmen as he finds them, and let them show their weaknesses together with their strength, which will involve the Gothic imperfection, but render the whole work as noble as the intellect of the age can make it. But the principle may be stated more broadly still. I have confined the illustration of it to architecture, but I must not leave it as if true of architecture only. Hitherto, I have used the words imperfect and perfect merely to distinguish between work grossly unskillful and work executed with average precision and science. And I have been pleading that any degree of unskillfulness should be admitted, so that the laborer's mind had room for expression. But accurately speaking, no good work whatever can be perfect, and the demand for perfection is always a sign of a misunderstanding of the ends of art. Now, this is for two reasons, both based on everlasting laws. The first, that no great man ever stops working will he have reached the point of failure. That is to say, his mind is always far in advance of his powers of execution, and the latter will now and then give way in trying to follow it. Besides that, he will always give to the inferior portions of his work only such inferior attention as they require, and according to his greatness, he becomes so accustomed to the feeling of dissatisfaction with the best he can do that in moments of lassitude or anger with himself, he will not care, though the beholder be dissatisfied also. I believe there has been only one man who would not acknowledge this necessity and strove always to reach perfection, Leonardo, the end of his vain effort being merely that he would take 10 years to a picture and leave it unfinished. And therefore, if we are to have great men working at all, or less men doing their best, the work will be imperfect, however beautiful. Of human work, none but what is bad can be perfect in its own bad way. The second reason is that imperfection is in some sort essential to all that we know of life. It is the sign of life in a mortal body, that is to say, of a state of progress and change. Nothing that lives is or can be rigidly perfect. Part of it is decaying, part nascent. The foxglove blossom, a third part bud, a third part past, a third part in full bloom, is a type of the life of this world. And in all things that live, there are certain irregularities and deficiencies, which are not only signs of life, sources of beauty. No human face is exactly the same in its lines on each side, no leaf perfect in its lobes, no branch in its symmetry. All admit irregularity, as they imply change, and to banish imperfection is to destroy expression. Yeah. Oh, excuse me, check exertion to paralyze vitality. All things are literally better, lovelier, and more beloved for the imperfections which have been divinely appointed, that the law of human life may be effort, and the law of human judgment, mercy.
Yeah, that's it.
That's wonderful. Really.
One of Ruskin's great hymns to imperfection.
Yes, yes. Oh, I just want to add something about Leonardo. Um, Frequently, I have to say, reading this, not too deeply, I'll be honest, I'm a little confused about Ruskin's comments on certain Italian Renaissance painters. I really like, I can't quite see that this and this and this is in this category. Now, here for Leonardo, yes. And everyone, the Adoration of the Magi, this particular painting left unfinished. Uh, most scholars have basically said that Leonardo was struggling with his realization as a scientist that one point perspective is not an accurate rendition of what we see. And therefore, he kept struggling with somehow finding a system that would, a scientific system that would enable what he felt was a correct rendering of the figures in space. And therefore, he never finished it.
Mm-hmm.
That's I should say that is a well-known issue, and many scholars, of course, have looked at the painting. I have to confess myself, I frequently enjoy watching a painting that just happens to be unfinished. Not that the artist wanted to not finish it. It was a sketch. It was like halfway there, and then the artist was called somewhere else, like a cop. Yeah. And you look at it and you see the edges of the brush strokes, and it's this wonderful dialogue between what might have gone here and the shall we say the exquisite finish that you see perhaps in the eyes or the nose. But then the neck and the collar, and that hasn't been, somehow settled yet. So that's just something personal, but definitely his analysis of Leonardo is what uh, uh, other scholars have seen as well.
And his own watercolors, of course, are a case in point of leaving the details of a particular architectural series of arches unfinished. Letting the imagination fill in the rest is extremely interesting. Even if within what he has finished, it is minutely observed. I find that's paradox I really enjoy very much. There's a little bit of his idea of synecdoche there, isn't there, of seeing the whole in the part. So as long as you get the part correct, then we will understand what the whole is expressing.
Right. If you render the boulder accurately, you will understand the mountain.
Precisely that wonderful watercolor. Absolutely. Yes. And of course, it's very difficult to know what scale that boulder is.
Yes.
Wonderfully. Yeah, no, it's terrific. Terrific.
And what he is saying also interesting, I think, is that it is the idea of perfection is a misunderstanding of art. So also Ruskin, my impression is that he is always trying to correct the reading, the mind of the reader. So as he had done previously with the buying, with the approach with the beads, the glass beads, and saying, well, if you do this, you are wrong and you are a slave in a way. Now is saying, if you pursue art, if you think that art is perfect, great art is perfect, you are wrong. So he is always correcting, inviting the reader, urging the reader to change completely his approach to art. So is in this sense is an education, a way of educating the reader to change completely, I would say, his approach to art. And in fact, in the next paragraph, he is talking about the British and English mind, thinking that order is a criterion of art, which is wrong. So.
Oh, I just wanted to add something in the early 20th century that, of course, we're all aware of course, is that both the Soviet regime and then after that, the Chinese regimes tried to control art. I mean, Hitler a bit, but that's something, okay. I mean, a bit, but what we know about is, of course, the posters. And previously, there were very exciting posters and all of this. And then even shall I say, the most naive viewer can easily look at the banal, repetitious, uninteresting nature of these posters, and it isn't the subject matter. It was clearly that, oh, no, 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 because, of course, once you let an artist be creative in the expression, they think. And therefore, they think then about the subject matter as well as the expression. So the only way to control that is to absolutely set down something. And it's a great example of, shall we say, the mechanization of painting in the same way that Ruskin is so deeply concerned with the mechanization of production of things. So, but I just say this because it's almost, for us today, it's almost laughable.
Yes.
We look back and we say, how could anyone have thought anyone wanted to look at this, right?
Yeah. There's that also helped to explain why the CIA was so supportive of Rothko, because Rothko expressed in precision the veils of the temple, the unknowable, and the CIA thought this was a great counter attack on the imagery of communism.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it is amazing that you had official, government people in the United States supporting abstract expression.
It is amazing.
Wait, look. Of course, they made it into a masculinist thing. I have to add this, right, which has been corrected a bit, but their language in describing it, of course, was all this vigorous. Yeah. So, but so thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
Thank you. We could perhaps continue and read paragraph 26 and 27. And Bernie, would you like to read, please, for us?
Yes, I would be happy to.
Thank you.
The second mental element above named was changefulness, or variety. I've already enforced the allowing independent operation to the inferior workman, simply as a duty to him, and as ennobling the architecture by rendering it more Christian. We have now to consider what reward we obtain for the performance of this duty, namely, the perpetual variety of every feature of the building. Wherever the workman is utterly enslaved, the parts of the building must of course be absolutely like each other, for the perfection of his execution can only be reached by exercising him in doing one thing, and giving him nothing else to do. The degree in which the workman is degraded may be thus known at a glance, by observing whether the several parts of the building are similar or not, and if, as in Greek work, all the capitals are alike, and all the mouldings unvaried, then the degradation is complete. If, as in Egyptian or Ninevite work, though the manner of executing certain figures is always the same, the order of design is perpetually varied, the degradation is less total. If, as in Gothic work, there is perpetual change both in design and execution, the workman must have been altogether set free. How much the beholder gains from the liberty of the laborer may perhaps be questioned in England, where one of the strongest instincts in nearly every mind is that love of order which makes us desire that our house windows should pair like our carriage horses, and allows us to yield our faith unhesitatingly to architectural theories which fix a form for everything and forbid variation from it. I would not impeach love of order. It is one of the most useful elements of the English mind. It helps us in our commerce and in all our purely practical matters, and it is in many cases one of the foundation stones of morality. Only do not let us suppose that love of order is love of art. It is true that order, in its highest sense, is one of the necessities of art, just as time is a necessity of music. But love of order has no more to do with our right enjoyment of architecture or painting than love of punctuality with the appreciation of an opera. Experience, I fear, teaches us that accurate and methodical habits in daily life are seldom characteristic of those who either quickly perceive or richly possess the creative powers of art. There is, however, nothing inconsistent between the two instincts, and nothing to hinder us from retaining our business habits, and yet fully allowing and enjoying the noblest gifts of invention.
Okay, let's stop there.
Okay, great.
Can anyone suggest why the English are so in love with order? What advantage is it to them?
I don't know. I don't think just the English, but if you see the Greek, their the symmetry is it's mathematic. They're numbers. They're in love with numbers.
Mm.
The Greek philosophy started with nature is made of numbers, so architecture is made of numbers too, and that's a kind of order.
Very good, Claudia. Thank you. Yep. I wanted to suggest that perhaps order was particularly helpful to the English in their empire, in colonialization, which requires militarization, which requires order.
I would suggest also that it was a part of the history, and I think from the Hundred Years' War, the War of the Roses, the war of the wars that occurred later in Parliament and elsewhere, that it is more than anything else an abhorrence of disorder.
Mm-hmm.
because they've seen the effects of that.
Ah, I see. Yes. Yes. Although our parliament now is renowned abroad for being completely disorderly.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
well,
I have something to add, actually, is that um, my first perception would be of that the English, okay, the Enlightenment, um, saw the importation of the Palladian style as something that was distinguished people intellectually, and
mhm,
the construction of the Palladial grand manner was something. If someone could, they did, and if they of course, then they added the folly sometimes, but constantly with this order, which was a borrowed concept. And when you borrow the concept, you have to have some rules to bring it from, you know, the Veneto, right, over to England. Um, and it might very much be that what we're thinking about in order is a relatively recent demonstration in English artistic expression, which, of course, and at that same time, the importation of the Palladian style um, was connected with collecting Greek antiquities
mhm,
or Roman and Greek antiquities,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so that, and then, so I don't know. I have, my suggestion is that perhaps a very long range view of the production of English Gothic, especially since uh, England's Gothic resisted classical, what was it, smothering for much longer than most other countries.
Mm.
And I don't know, my naive view was, whoa, if you've got a fan vault, you better be waiting for something that's really, really good to make you give it up. You know,
Good point.
it's got to be better than this. And that's going a long way. So, yeah, so I think it might be a more recent, but that which then, of course, connects with England's power in the empire.
Mm.
Again, this is that it's not an English quote unquote trait, but it's a part of England's, might I say, more recent history.
Mm, certainly. Does this connect also with Freemasonry? Picking up on,
Hmm.
because
Well,
you'll know that Chiswick House outside London, house designed in part by Lord Burlington. Lord Burlington was a leading Freemason, and there's been quite a lot of work done on the relationship between that house and Freemasonry. And the central emblem of Freemasonry is the eye, but it's a controlling eye, partnered with dividers. And Burney last week wonderfully quoted Blake's Chartered Streets, by which Blake was horrified. And there's something about Ruskin being horrified by that which can be measured with dividers, because that's how you make a classical moulding, with dividers. So that Freemasonry seems to me to be part and parcel of that British Empire, and that search for an order which can then be readily replicated in the rest of the world.
Yeah, thank you.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yes, thank you. We can perhaps continue our reading and read paragraph 40.
Right.
Since I mean, a lot, of course, there is to be said, but can find who could read. Claudio, maybe. Claudio, would you like to read, please? for us?
Okay.
Thank
Hold on
you.
just a moment. Let me scroll down to it. There we are.
Yes, this is a really, really architectural paragraph, I would
Yes.
say. Yes.
Yes. I must now refer for a moment, before we quit the consideration of this, the second mental element of Gothic, to the opening of the third chapter of the Seven Lamps of Architecture, in which the distinction was drawn between man gathering and man governing, between his acceptance to a source of delight from nature and his development of authoritative or imaginative power in their arrangement. For the two mental elements, not only of Gothic, but of all good architecture, which we have just been examining, belong to it, and are admirable in it, chiefly as it is, more than any other subject of art, the work of man, and the expression of the average power of man. A picture or poem is often little more than a feeble utterance of man's admiration of something out of himself, but architecture approaches more to a certain of his own, born of his necessities and expressive of his nature. It is also, in some sort, the work of the whole race, while the picture or statue is a work of one only, in most cases more highly gifted than his fellows. And therefore we may expect that the first two elements of good architecture should be expressive of some great truth commonly belonging to the whole race, and necessary to be understood or felt by them in all their work that they do under the sun. And observe what they are: the confession of imperfection and the confession of desire of change. The building of the bird and the bee needs not express anything like this. It is perfect and unchanging, but just because we are something better than birds or bees, our building must confess that we have not reached the perfection we can imagine and cannot rest in the condition we have attained. If we pretend to have reached either perfection or satisfaction, we have degraded ourselves and our work. God's work only may express that, but ours may never have that sentence written upon it. And behold, it was very good. And observe again, it is not merely as it renders the edifice a book of various knowledge or a mine of precious thought, that verity is essential to its nobleness. The vital principle is not the love of knowledge, but the love of change. It is that strange disquietude of the Gothic spirit that is its greatness, that restlessness of the dreaming mind that wanders high,
Hither and thither.
Hither and
hither
thither.
and thither among the niches, and flickers feverish around the pinnacles, and fleets and fades in labyrinths, knots and shadows along wall and roof. And it is not satisfied, nor shall be satisfied. The Greek could say could stay in his triglyphs for furrow, but and be at peace. And but the work of Gothic art is fretwork still, and it can neither rest in nor from its labor, but must pass on sleeplessly until its love of change shall be pacified forever in the change that must come alike on them that wake and then in them that sleep.
Oh, wonderful,
Amazing.
Very much. Yes.
wonderful.
Mm.
I wonder, my first reaction here, and it was again, I'm not as, deeply into this, is that it suddenly hit me that when someone is satisfied with what they are, they don't want to move anywhere else.
Mm.
And the one thing about being a human being is to acknowledge the imperfection, not in terms of I'm so imperfect next to this person, this other person, but I am imperfect because I am not God. But at every moment, I can love or imagine, whatever word we want to say, that essence that is perfection. And at each point, I strive to reach it more, but I know I never can because I am a creature. But the energy that I show in that striving brings me closer. And somehow, yeah, this is he's saying it's you're never at peace. You're at in that, well, I finished it all and that's it, and I don't need to change, and this is perfect and this is fine. But that recognition that everything in life is flux is just so spiritually, embedded in what he's talking about in looking at, lattice work, across a facade. Really amazing.
Mm. I like the triglyph furrow.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
Brilliant.
In Modern Painters too, there is a passage on imagination penetrative in which Ruskin uses exactly the same kind of verbs of movement, of rest, of a restless, say, movement, disquietude, and which remind me exactly that passage of this, the same restlessness, but imaginative. So the life of the imagination, which is active in the artist and the Gothic artist mind. In that context, he's particularly talking about Tintoretto, Tintoretto's mind, Tintoretto's penetrative imagination. But it seems to me that it's quite similar, that kind of process that he is describing.
Mhm. One of the most famous quotes in relationship to Augustine is, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee."
Mm.
And this is what this paragraph was saying to me. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. The love of change.
Well, let me say, it's not even, okay, it's not exactly what I would say, the love of change, but the acknowledgement that change is the only way to have life,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
right? So and so therefore the embracing of change because you're affirming life.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
And without a guarantee that that change will be better, what I mean,
Mm.
yeah, it but necessary because it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Shall we continue reading paragraph 41?
Yes, there are
Thank
shorter
you.
paragraphs, 41 through the end
Yes.
of 44.
Yes. Perhaps Nicholas, would you like to read for us, please?
41, did you say 41?
41.
44.
Yes. You
Through
should be able to read on the
44.
screen, on
Yes.
shared screen. Thank you.
The third constituent element of the Gothic mind was stated to be naturalism. That is to say, the love of natural objects for their own sake and the effort to represent them frankly, unconstrained by artistical laws. This characteristic of the style partly follows in necessary connection with those named above. For so soon as the workman is left free to represent what subjects he chooses, he must look to the nature that is around him for material, and will endeavour to represent it as he sees it, with more or less accuracy according to the skill he possesses, and with much play of fancy, but with small respect for law. There is, however, a marked distinction between the imaginations of the Western and Eastern races, even when both are left free. The Western, or Gothic, delighting most in the representation of facts, and the Eastern, Arabian, Persian, and Chinese, in the harmony of colours and forms. Each of these intellectual dispositions has its particular forms of error and abuse, which, though I have often before stated, I must here again briefly explain. And this the rather because the word naturalism is, in one of its senses, justly used as a term of reproach, and the questions respecting the real relations of art and nature are so many and so confused throughout all the schools of Europe at this day, that I cannot clearly enunciate any single truth without appearing to admit, sorry, Gabriel, could you kindly scroll? In fellowship with it, some kind of error, unless the reader will bear with me in entering into such an analysis of the subject as will serve us for general guidance. We are to remember, in the first place, that the arrangement of colours and lines is an art analogous to the composition of music, and entirely independent of the representation of facts. Good colouring does not necessarily convey the image of anything but itself. It consists in certain proportions and arrangements of rays of light, but not in likenesses to anything. A few touches of certain greys and purples laid by a master's hand on white paper will be good colouring. As more touches are added beside them, we may find out that they were intended to represent a dove's neck. And we may praise, as the drawing advances, the perfect imitation of the dove's neck. But the good colouring does not consist in that imitation, but in the abstract qualities and relations of the grey and purple. In like manner, as soon as a great sculptor begins to shape his work out of the block, we shall see that its lines are nobly arranged and of noble character. We may not have the slightest idea for what the forms are intended, whether they are of man or beast, of vegetation or drapery. Their likeness to anything does not affect their nobleness. They are magnificent forms, and that is all we need care to know of them, in order to say whether the workman is a good or bad sculptor. Now, the noblest art is an exact unison of the abstract value with the imitative power of forms and colours. It is the noblest composition used to express the noblest facts. But the human mind cannot in general unite the two perfections. It either pursues the fact to the neglect of the composition, or pursues the composition to the neglect of the fact. And it is intended by the deity that it should do this. The best art is not always wanted. Facts are often wanted without art, as in a geological diagram, and art often without facts, as in a Turkey carpet. And most men have been made capable of giving either one or the other, but not both. Only one or two, the very highest, can give both. Observe then, men are universally divided as respects their artistical qualifications into three great classes: a right, a left, and a centre. On the right side are the men of facts, on the left the men of design, in the centre the men of both. The three classes, of course, pass into each other by imperceptible gradations. The men of facts are hardly ever altogether without some powers of design. The men of design are always in some measure cognizant of facts. And as each class possesses more or less of the powers of the opposite one, it approaches to the character of the central class. Few men, even in that central rank, are so exactly throned on the summit of the crest that they cannot be perceived to incline in the least one way or the other, embracing both horizons with their glance. Now, each of these classes has, as I above said, a healthy function in the world and correlative diseases or unhealthy functions. And when the work of either of them is seen in its morbid condition, we are apt to find fault with the class of workmen instead of finding fault only with the particular abuse which has perverted their action.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is quite complex.
Yeah, I found it quite difficult, this passage.
Passage. Yes, it is. It is. It divides the classes of artists into two at first, two categories: the ones of design and the ones of fact, and then there is a third one, which is which occupies the center of it. If I'm not wrong. So fact, design, and then the central one, and then and then we will, perhaps if we move, we will find the third category of artists. Do you have anything to add to this particularly complex?
It related it all to the kind of the dispute of the Renaissance, the disegno versus the colorito debate.
Yeah.
Is this kind of the same type of thing, maybe put in different words, or is it similar but not the same?
I think I thought of that as well, Elizabeth, as we were going through, but I actually think it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
In that disegno refers in Italian art to not just drawing or the facts, but to composition as well. So I'm a little uncertain about that.
Yeah,
it's a difficult, as Emma was saying, this is a difficult section because to get a better grip on it, it takes the whole section from 41 to really to 60. I mean, it's a long excursus. He sets up his divisions and then tries to unpack them and associate them with certain artists and certain movements. What I thought we might do is maybe go to 55 through 57, which is one of his several summaries of these points when he tries to maneuver out of examples and then go back to a summary principle. So maybe 55 to 57 may help us.
Absolutely. Yes. Maybe Elizabeth, would you like to read, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
55 through 57?
Yes.
55, 57. Yes. Thank you.
55 to 57. Let me pull this up here for some.
Yes. Now we have the three classes. So now it's getting, I think, clearer somehow.
Now observe the three classes into which artists were previously divided, of men of fact, men of design, and men of both, are all of divine institution. But of these latter three, the last is in no wise of divine institution. It is entirely human, and the men who belong to it have sunk into it by their own faults. They are so far forth, either useless or harmful men. It is indeed good that evil should be occasionally represented, even in its worst forms, but never that it should be taken delight in. And the mighty men of the central class will always give all that is needful of it, sometimes, as Hogarth did, dwelling upon it bitterly as satirists. but this with the more effect because they will neither exaggerate it nor represent it mercilessly, and without the atoning points that all evil shows to a divinely guided glance, even at its deepest. So then, though the third class will always, I fear, in some measure exist, the two necessary classes are only the first two, and this is so far acknowledged by the general sense of men that the basest class has been confounded with the second, and painters have been divided commonly only into two ranks, now known, I believe, throughout Europe by the names which they first received in Italy, puristi and naturalisti. Since, however, in the existing state of things, the degraded or evil-loving class, though less defined than that of the puristi, is just as vast as it is indistinct, this division has done infinite dishonor to the great faithful painters of nature, and it has long been one of the objects I have had most at heart to show that in reality the purists, in their sanctity, are less separated from those natural painters than the sensualists in their foulness, and that the difference, though less discernible, is in reality greater between the man who pursues evil for its own sake and him who bears with it for the sake of truth than between this latter and the man who will not endure it at all. Let us then endeavor briefly to mark the real relations of these three vast ranks of men, whom I shall call for convenience in speaking of them purists, naturalists, and sensualists. Not that these terms express the real characters, but I know no word, and cannot coin a convenient one, which would accurately express the opposite of purist. And I keep the terms purist and naturalist in order to comply as far as possible with the established usage of language on the continent. Now observe, in saying that nearly everything presented to us in nature has mingled in it of good and evil, I do not mean that nature is conceivably improvable, or that anything that God has made could be called evil, if we could see far enough into its uses, but that with respect to immediate effects or appearances, it may be so, just as the hard rind or bitter kernel of a fruit may be an evil to the eater, though in the one it is the protection of the fruit, and in the other its continuance. The purist therefore does not mend nature, but receives from nature and from God that which is good for him, while the sensualist fills himself with the husks that the swine did eat. The three classes may therefore be likened to men reaping wheat, of which the purist takes the fine flour, and the sensualist the chaff and straw. But the naturalist takes all home and makes their cake of the one and their couch of the other. For instance, we know more certainly every day that whatever appears to us harmful in the universe has some benefit or necessary operation, that the storm which destroys a harvest brightens the sunbeams for harvests yet unsown, and that the volcano which buries a city preserves 1,000 from destruction. But the evil is not for the time less fearful, because we have learned it to be necessary. We easily understand the timidity or the tenderness of the spirit, which would withdraw itself from the presence of destruction and create in its imagination a world of which the peace should be unbroken, in which the sky should not darken nor the sea rage, in which the leaf should not change nor the blossom wither. That man is greater, however, who contemplates with an equal mind the alternations of terror and of beauty, who, not rejoicing less beneath the sunny sky, can bear also to watch the bars of twilight narrowing on the horizon, and not less sensible to the blessing of the peace of nature, can rejoice in the magnificence of the ordinances by which that peace is protected and secured. But separated from both by an immeasurable distance would be the man who delighted in convulsions and disease for their own sake, who found his daily food in the disorder of nature mingled with the suffering of humanity, and watched joyfully at the right hand of the angel whose appointed work is to destroy as well as to accuse, while the corners of the house of feasting were struck by the wind from the wilderness.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, the classes are naturalisti and the purists, puristi and naturalisti. So design is referred to the purists i puristi, and fact to naturalisti. I think this is the class. But then the third class comes in and is the one that he defines as sensualists. Yes, in a very complex way, is moving to this counteropposition, which is also a counteropposition. I mean, some categories that he also describes at length in modern painters. And yeah, shall we go on a bit, because otherwise we can't read
Right.
the bar. Or
Yeah.
would you like to add anything?
Well,
Sorry.
what I would like to suggest is that we omit 6061, which is an example. It's a particularly famous sort of analysis of a Murillo painting with some humor in it as well. But I think in view of the time, maybe we ought to do our last 70 through 71, and at least that will take us as far as we had planned to go.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone like to read? Especially someone who hasn't read.
I could do it.
Great.
I haven't read yet. Emma, you're muted, by the way.
Oh, sorry. I was suggesting, Tyson to read 70 and Miriam 71.
Great.
So
Okay.
we have all the voices. Thank you.
I have before alluded to the strange and vain supposition that the original conception of Gothic architecture had been derived from vegetation, from the symmetry of avenues and the interlacing of branches. It is a supposition which never could have existed for a moment in the mind of any person acquainted with early Gothic. But however idle as a theory, it is most valuable as a testimony to the character of the perfected style. It is precisely because the reverse of this theory is the fact, because the Gothic did not arise out of, but develops itself into, a resemblance to vegetation, that this resemblance is so instructive as an indication of the temper of the builders. It was no chance suggestion of the form of an arch from the bending of a bough, but a gradual and continual discovery of a beauty in natural forms, which could be more and more perfectly transferred into those of stone, that influenced at once the heart of the people and the form of the edifice. The Gothic architecture arose in massy and mountainous strength, axe-hewn and iron-bound, block heaved upon block by the monk's enthusiasm and the soldier's force, and cramped and stanchioned into such weight of grisly wall as might bury the anchoret in darkness, and beat back the utmost storm of battle, suffering but by the same narrow crosslet the passing of the sunbeam or of the arrow. Gradually, as that monkish enthusiasm became more thoughtful, and as the sound of war became more and more intermittent beyond the gates of the convent or the keep, the stony pillar grew slender, and the vaulted roof grew light, till they had wreathed themselves into the semblance of the summer woods at their fairest, and of the dead field flowers long trodden down in blood. Sweet monumental statues were set to bloom forever beneath the porch of the temple or the canopy of the tomb.
Thank you very much. Miriam? Maybe.
I'm here. I'm sorry.
Can you read?
I was looking
on
for,
the screen.
Thank you so much. I was downloading the volume because I haven't it on my. I was reading in the screen, then I got lost, and I was downloading. So I'm sorry for interrupting it. There was a Kleenex there.
71.
Yeah.
Almost.
Okay. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nor is it only as a sign of greater gentleness or refinement of mind, but as a proof of the best possible direction of his refinement, that the tendency of the Gothic to the expression of vegetative life is to be admired. That sentence of Genesis, "I've given thee every green herb for meat," like all the rest of the book, is a profound symbolical as well as a literal meaning. It's not merely the nourishment of the body, but the food of the soul that is intended. The green herb is of all nature that which is most essential to the healthy spiritual life of a man. Most of us do not need fine scenery. The precipice and the mountain peak are not intended to be seen by all men. Perhaps the power is greatest over those who are unaccustomed to them. But trees and fields and flowers that were made for all and are necessary for all. God has connected.
Sorry.
Thank you. God has connected the labor which is essential to the bodily sustenance with the pleasure which are healthiest for the heart. And while he made the ground stubborn, he made its herbage fragrant and its blossom fair. The proudest architecture that man can build is no higher honor than to bear the image and recall the memory of that grass of the field, which is at once the type and the support of his existence. The goodly building is then most glorious when it's sculptured into the likeness of the leaves of paradise, and the great Gothic spirit, as we showed it to be noble in its disquietude, is also noble in its hold of nature. It is indeed like the dove of Noah, in that she found no rest upon the face of the waters, but like her in this also, lo, and a mouth was an olive branch plucked off.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I have this is Susan. I have a question. I didn't want to bother anyone when I joined in late, but in reading these, first of all, they're just absolutely beautiful to read over and over in and of themselves. But one of the things that jumped out at me while I was reading and even hearing everyone read today, does anyone have any knowledge of his conferences or his lectures? Does he rage against, I know it's burgeoning at that time, the industrialists or sort of the assembly lineage of, or the assemblage of mass produced things? I think we all know by now what his thoughts would be on that, but are there any lectures to or anything, any of his writings that rage against that in and of themselves? Or, you know, it's in all of his writings in these there are a bit of influence around that, but has there anything been more overt in his lectures or writings on that? Because it's the antithesis of everything he's talking about here, the mass produced, the beauty and imperfections, and not having, have things mass produced, but the creative and each and of themselves all be different. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, there are earlier passages in the nature of Gothic which speak directly to the treatment of the workman and to the assembly line and to the industrial process. His lectures talk about this much more extensively. I'm thinking particularly of Traffic, where he's actually speaking to industrialists and the burghers of Brantford, and in a real way appealing to them to understand the contradictions in what we might call not just the industrial process, but industrial culture. In all the ways in which the industrial model becomes the prototype of life itself.
Yeah, everything that it brings. Yeah.
everything that it brings,
Yeah.
and his appeal to them to understand, in a certain sense, the spiritual split, the
Mm.
spiritual split personality that this represents, and the enormous dangers that this proposes. And of course, later on develops in a more fragmentary way, but powerfully in the
Unto this last.
unto this last,
Unto
certainly
this
Unto this
where
last,
last.
Ephesians
where he
6.
argues this point. Yeah. And
Yes.
then more
Yes.
apocalyptically in the Storm Cloud of the 19th century,
Oh, yeah.
where he sees this industrial process now uh, uh, polluting and deforming nature itself.
Mm.
Yeah.
By
Yes.
comparison to those amazing texts, those lectures, the most recent passages that we've been reading seem to me to be less incisive. And I find him confusing his arguments, becoming self-contradictory, as if he's confused because he wants to bring it back to God and he's not quite sure how to do it. That's my impression.
Hmm.
Well, I think he does actually with 71. He brings his whole argument
Yeah.
of Gothic naturalism to the leaves of paradise,
Mm.
and to the intimations, which
Mm.
brings him also back to the disquietude in anticipation of a greater reality.
Yeah, but I don't see how that relates to his three classes of men and his disgust by the third.
Mm.
I feel that the argument it's losing clarity for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we always have to remember, particularly when Ruskin is arguing some sort of set of distinctions, that he's thinking on the page.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Mm.
He's working it out for himself.
Yeah,
And
and
in some
maybe
cases, you have the sense of an improvisation. He's
Mm,
working it as he goes along.
mm, mm,
And sometimes our sense is that the argument doesn't work
mm,
as well as he might have hoped it did. Doesn't
Mm.
clarify as much as
mm.
he intended.
Yeah.
I wanted to add that, as I sort of said earlier, the this discussion and the identification of the artists at some point, I find very difficult to follow. I
Mm,
mean, I mean, um, I actually thought of pulling up images and things, but then I'm saying which one is he looking at, and there may be, yeah. But at any rate, this kind of categorization of artists, I found difficult to really understand.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, I did too.
the architecture was seems seems more comprehensible, but
Mhm.
defining. So yeah, that's all.
Mhm. Yes. We can. There is also that particular sentence which I find particularly intriguing, and when he says, paragraph 70, the Gothic did not arise out of, but developed itself into a resemblance to vegetation.
Mm,
This plan is so instructive as an indication of the temper of the builders. So the Gothic did not arise out of, so did not take nature as a model in a way, unlike the classicist or neoclassical style, but developed itself into a resemblance to vegetation. What do you mean? How have you interpreted this?
well,
This develop itself into a resemblance.
I think he was thinking of the difference in English Gothic architecture between what's been called early English and what's called decorated Gothic. So thinking of late 12th century Gothic through to late 13th century Gothic. And then beginning in about the 1290s, decorated Gothic, which bursts out with foliate columns and wonderful sense of growth, even in the design of stained glass windows and so on. And that then persists through, I suppose you could say, until the 1360s and that English invention of perpendicular Gothic, which returns us to what one might call fact, and something he might not like so much. One of the people that Ruskin seems to dislike in terms of his practice is Pugin. I think because Pugin was keenly interested in perpendicular Gothic, and Ruskin, absolutely in tune with his time, which is coincident with the architecture of G.E. Street and of George Gilbert Scott, is keenly interested in foliate Gothic, naturalistic Gothic.
Thank you very much for that. That makes absolute sense. And going back to looking at the development, that clear development from early English to the decorated, that absolutely makes sense in terms of this, something that didn't happen elsewhere, actually, right? There are many sort of parallels on the continent and on England, but that particular development, no. And for people who are the uninitiated, it takes a while to look and categorize and say, oh, wait, and to put the dates on things, and then to see, now I can see the trajectory. Because just simply, oh, well, shall we say, skimming over in a textbook won't do it unless you're on the ground. And then you begin to see exactly what is the decorated. And it makes total sense as well when you were talking about Pugin. I also think that the position of Pugin as a polemicist and the equating that Pugin did, which so many, I mean, it's quite typical of Gothic revival, right? Is they quite clearly said, I think French maybe a little bit more, this is not a new style, it is a continuity of what was before, and they believed it. That we have discovered, and for any even, I would say, untrained eye looking today, you can clearly see that the work is being created by someone accustomed to three-dimensionality and academic training, academic production, with the conscious idea, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create something different, flat and two-dimensional and whatever, so that for me, the Gothic revival, for the most part, certainly in England, and All Saints St. Margaret Street, which of course is a glorious building, wonderful building, but it is surface. It is not the English decorated, right, which has the three-dimensionality, and the architecture is three-dimensional. The delight of All Saints is this lovely to say, a great deal of variation within a surface.
Polychromy.
And polychromy. Oh yeah, definitely polychromy. But and that since it's being done, since the concentration is in that direction, the exercise of three-dimensionality is basically a thought of creating an interior space that is capable of housing the people we want, not of the sense that space should be manipulated in terms of this pulsation, push and pull, and recognition of voids and solids, and however, the medieval would handle it. But that makes absolute sense when you were saying that he's looking at that, and then this sense of his antipathy to Pugin being very clear. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we can perhaps, Gabriel, stop here.
Yes.
Yes. And we'll have another session
Session next
next
Saturday.
Okay.
And we'll finish the chapter. And maybe because we'll see. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to kind of discuss our impressions of the whole experience of studying it, as well as consider particular paragraphs.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma.
Have a great
Thank you.
weekend.
Thank you, Emma.
Sunday.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
you.
By the way, in Venice is the Madonna della Salute.
Yes.
Yesterday was. So there is
Oh,
the
was it? Oh,
Wonderful.
pilgrimage,
wonderful.
candles, and so we'll have a thought of you all.
Oh,
Thank
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
I will
Right.
notice. Yeah, I will note as
Right.
well that today is Saint Cecilia's Day, and it is also the 62nd anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Oh yeah.
Oh, really? My heavens. Have to think back.
And so I plan on reading W.H. Auden's Ode to Saint Cecilia, the setting of it, choral setting of it by Benjamin Britten, and that lovely Lincoln Memorial my mind is going. Let's see.
The Gettysburg Address? No?
No.
No, what?
No, the Lincoln portrait by Aaron Copland.
Aaron Copland, right.
The portrait, Aaron Copland. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, understand.
Yes.
Very good. We'll
Very
think
good.
of you. Thank for that. Okay.
Emma, thank you so much.
Bye. Thank
Miriam?
you. Thank you, Miriam.
Bye-bye. Very good.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.